Hey everybody, it's the driving edition of the waitingfornextyear.com podcast. The Cleveland Browns are 0-1-1 now. And man, did their kicker implode. Zane Gonzalez, I don't even know how many things he missed. 2 extra points and 2 field goals, whatever. All of it. He missed all of them. People are piling on him today. And now as the Browns sit 0-1-1, I find myself kind of not all that frustrated. I thought the Browns had a really good game plan yesterday. I thought the coaching was really smart. It was a very conservative offensive game plan that seemed intent on keeping Drew Brees off the field. I thought the Browns did a really good job of that. I know the running game was frustrating in the first half. They couldn't get chunks of yardage, but they committed to it anyway. And how many times in the last 2 years were we frustrated by Hugh Jackson not committing to the run game? The minute it didn't seem like it was working, he would just abandon it, and they would throw 140 times with DeShone Kizer, much to the chagrin of our chances of winning a game. How many times? And now the Browns are committing to the running game with Carlos Hyde, even as it's not perfect and it's not working perfectly, not working all that well. But that's what you have to do. That's how you control the clock. That's how you keep your defense fresh. That's how you enact a game plan that does everything it can to mitigate the Hall of Fame quarterback on the opposite side of the field. And no, it didn't work. It didn't work. The Browns were underdogs coming into the game. They made it a fight. They had a real good chance, and they lost in the end. They lost because of the kicker. They lost because of all these different things. And how many of you out there want to fire Hugh Jackson now because he's 132-1 or whatever he is? And I just don't understand it. I understand everybody wanting Hugh Jackson fired after last season. But once the decision's made and they keep Hugh Jackson and they hire an offensive coordinator and Hugh finally gives up play calling duties and just has to be that CEO kind of head coach like Mike Tomlin, where he's not really pushing his own agenda on the coordinators as much as he's kind of managing the overall team. What exactly is it that Hugh Jackson did yesterday that caused the Browns to lose the game? At what point are you looking at him and going, all right, if they just flopped him out, this team would be 2-0. They'd have 2 wins, or they'd have 1 win and 1 tie. I don't understand, this continual obsession with that record and just going back to it all the time. It's counterproductive. I get that you don't like Hugh Jackson. I understand that his record is what it is. But they made the right moves to mitigate him as a factor. And that sounds weird saying that about your head coach, mitigating your head coach as a factor. But the idea is that it was a really bad idea to have a head coach who was also the offensive coordinator. Having all that power in one spot in a coaching staff where you're allowed to kind of spend as much money as you want and have as many resources as you feel like, to ask one person to do 2 jobs seems like a really stupid thing to do. And the Browns did that for Hugh Jackson's first 2 years. And so now they finally are in a position where the coaching staff structure is right. They've got an experienced offensive coordinator in Todd Haley. They've got an experienced defensive coordinator in Greg Williams. And they've got a head coach whose only job now is to keep the team motivated, bring everything together, make sure there's a cohesive weekly game plan. And as far as I can tell, Hugh Jackson did that just fine this week. The team didn't win. They got beat by New Orleans. But it's not like Hugh Jackson coached the kicker to be garbage. It's not like Hugh Jackson it's not like the team gave up 75 points on defense. Yes, the offense is still struggling to score touchdowns, and they don't have enough points off of turnovers and everything else, but we always knew that the offense was going to be behind the defense. And that kind of brings me to the next thing. Browns fans I understand why everybody wants to see Baker Mayfield. He's the number 1 overall pick. I understand the frustration with Tyrod Taylor. He's not a super exciting, sexy quarterback. He's very workmanlike, and I understand. But the idea is that this offense can improve as it is right now if you just give it a little bit of time. And yes, we're going to run smack dab into Tyrod Taylor's ceiling at some point. But he's just buying time for Baker Mayfield. He's buying time. We always knew that his only job was to buy time for Baker Mayfield. Whether that's 4, 5, 6 weeks, I'm not sure. I know it's more than 2. I know it's more than 2 weeks. I know it's hard to be patient as the Browns lose games, but they weren't favored in either of these first 2 games anyway. Who actually thought the Browns were going to beat the Steelers and the Saints in the first 2 weeks? We'll talk about the Jets. That game, this one's different, but I don't understand. The only way you could be as frustrated as I see some Browns are with the lack of Baker Mayfield and Hugh Jackson and the things that are going on with the Browns is if you had unreasonable expectations for these first 2 weeks. I'm frustrated that they don't win as well, but I know better than to expect them to win in games where they're not favored. And I think there's a miscalculation by some Browns fans in terms of expectations and what the Browns are actually doing on Sundays right now. The only way you can be as frustrated as I see some of you are is if you thought they should have won, or if you thought they should have won going into the games. We all want them to win, I think. Finally, after 2 years, I think we all want them to win. There were some of you who wanted them to lose over the last 2 years to maximize draft picks. But now they're actually trying to win, and they're not. They haven't in 2 weeks. But it's a long season. It's a long season, and far be it for me to tell Browns fans to have patience because, it's been 20 years. It's been 2 years and 2 games with Hugh Jackson. It's been whatever, count from whichever starting point you feel like. Telling a Browns fan to have patience is a really, really tough argument to make. But I don't see any reason to try and fire Hugh Jackson and put Todd Haley in a position where he is now the head coach and the offensive coordinator, which is one of the main problems that Hugh Jackson had in his first 2 seasons. Browns fans need to stop looking for easy scapegoats and replacements. Sometimes it's not about replacing people, it's about people improving in place. The offensive line isn't going to magically get better by plopping people out and plopping new people in. The Cleveland Browns offense isn't naturally going to get better by moving people out and moving people in. Sometimes you need to get people used to playing together. Sometimes you need to allow a unit to grow working together. They're still trying to figure out who's going to be a part of the solution. They're trying to figure it out. Duke Johnson, they're still trying to figure out how much they can use him. Antonio Callaway had a pretty good game yesterday, I'd say. That caught that bomb. That was an amazing individual play, but he steps up for Josh Gordon, who's now out. They're still trying to figure this thing out. The season is young, very, very young. And here, the lack of patience for Todd Haley, Tyrod Taylor, and the rest of this offensive line that pretty much played no snaps together in the preseason, which is a league-wide issue, by the way. The fact that nobody plays the preseason. Nobody actually gets used to each other in the preseason. That's a league-wide thing. But I like this team right now. As much as you can like a team that's coming off an 0-16 season. I think the Tyrod Taylor trade is still a success. I think he's doing exactly what he's supposed to be doing. I would like to see, because he's an average quarterback, like the definition of NFL average quarterback, you're going to get those ups and downs. And we've gotten kind of that medium performance. I think there's an above average performance in Tyrod Taylor, and I'm hoping we can see that maybe this week against the Jets. The way you become an average quarterback is you have some above average performances and some below average performances, and I think we've seen kind of the lower end of Tyrod Taylor. I'm hoping we get to see the higher end over the next couple games, which brings us to Thursday against the Jets. This is one of the biggest games in recent Browns history. This is a game where the Browns are actually favored. This is where you break out that measuring stick and you see who this team is. The defense should have all the advantage against a rookie quarterback in Sam Darnold. The offense should be able to bring things together and actually put some points on the board and move the ball, because in the game of time of possession, the idea is that you're going to be able to frustrate the rookie quarterback and get him off the field quickly. Myles Garrett should have the advantage against that offensive line and that rookie quarterback. And so the Browns should have the advantage. Now, we'll see if they flip out their kicker. We'll see what they decide to do in terms of getting ready for this week. But, firing Hugh Jackson, installing Todd Haley, benching Tyrod Taylor for Baker Mayfield, now that the Browns are finally favored in a game, seems like about the silliest thing you could possibly do. Now's the time. Now's the time for the Browns to show the best of who they are. And if they don't, okay, I can understand being super frustrated. And depending on how it all works out, if the Browns don't win and they look even worse, I could understand losing your minds after this week. All bets are off after this week because the Browns are finally favored in a game. This is where the Browns are going to show us who they are and who they can be. But no, up to this point against the Steelers and the Saints, the Browns were never supposed to win those two games. And that doesn't mean that you shouldn't expect them to overachieve Vegas. It would have been nice. It would have been great. But the frustration level at these Browns and continuing to just pile the losses on Hugh Jackson's record as if this team hasn't drastically made changes already. The idea, if the Browns went 1-31 or whatever Hugh Jackson's record was coming into the season and came back with DeShone Kizer and didn't sign a whole bunch of veterans and didn't make the trade for Jarvis Landry and didn't sign Carlos Hyde, I could understand just continuing to count that record. But how much they changed over 70% of the roster. They hired Todd Haley. They've got all these new pieces in place. And now that doesn't hit the reset button on Hugh Jackson, that he doesn't get to reset the clock necessarily. I understand that. But if you really want them to achieve, you've got to give them some time to develop. And giving them until week 3 to finally hit a game where they're actually favored to start to figure things out, I think that's pretty reasonable. I don't think it's unreasonable to ask you to be patient, to wait until after the third game of the season, the one that we all pointed to on the schedule and said, all right, well, this one, the Browns should have a real good chance of winning. So that's this week. We'll see what happens. I don't expect this actually to work. I don't expect anybody to have patience because I did this podcast, but that's where we are. That's where we are. So I'm sure we'll have a lot more this week. It's been a little bit slow on the podcast lately, just real life getting in the way. And this week, I'm not even going to be around for the Browns game. So I'm going to have to watch it probably on my phone on YouTube TV. So we'll see how things go. But thanks for listening. Send me your feedback. I'm on Twitter, WFNY Craig. I'm the only one who's trying to keep things positive on Twitter, I think. But contact me there. So Thanks for listening. We'll talk to you next time. It's been the waitingfornextyear.com podcast.